Hello, my fellow men. I'm Vaughn, and I identify as a male, or man against living in error. And if you don't know, error, ERR, is another word for sin. If you didn't know that, you learned something new today. Welcome to the channel. Please subscribe if you're new. If you just stumbled across this video, subscribe, like the video, and share this content with anybody that you know. It'd be greatly appreciated, and you would be helping out a great deal. So a little bit about me. I've been on YouTube for 7 years now. My format that I'm going about now is a little different than what it was. I used to script my videos because I'm a structure guy. I like structure. I like my thoughts to be clear and concise, so I would write them down so that I can clearly convey the message that I wanted to convey, so that you, the viewer, could understand what it is that I'm trying to say. And that's how I've done it for a long time. Now I'm trying something different. I'm going off the top of the dome, right? So I'm speaking to you off the top of the dome. Now, throughout the course of the video, you'll see me turning pages. That's me reading scripture. And of course, I do have little bullet points that I want to hit on as notes. So if you see that, you know, but I am talking to you off the top of the dome. And I just wanted to give that a try, see how people would respond to that, and if they like that better than me doing a scripted video, right? So I can just be me, be myself, right? So getting into the video, all right, and what it's about. Within the red pill community, within the MGTOW space, one of the things that I hear them say an awful lot when it comes to justifying how it is that they live and their relationships with women, right? Having multiple women, right? Some will even say, oh, I love one, you know, but, you know, I have sex with all these other ones. Yeah, man, look, all right. A lot of these guys, like Fresh and Fit or a Sneeko, I'm pretty sure I've even heard Donovan Sharp say this, if I remember correctly. But definitely Fresh and Fit and Sneeko, because I see their content an awful lot. They'll say that kings have multiple wives. And I guess they use that as a justification for them having multiple women in their life. Whether they actually do or not is irrelevant, but that's what they're teaching other men, right? They'll use somebody like King Solomon when they're referencing that. Somebody like a King Solomon, King David, Abraham, or hold on one second. Yeah, they'll use somebody like a King Solomon or King David, Abraham, or Jacob, right? What do these guys have in common? They all had multiple wives. But in particular, we're going to be talking about Solomon today because he wrote 3 books within the Bible. 2 are very important. The first is Proverbs, the book of wisdom, right? The second, Ecclesiastes. Solomon is telling you how he chose to live his life, and then having a revelation towards the latter end of his life that everything that he pursued in life was meaningless. It was worthless. Okay, and we'll get more into that as we continue to go along through the video, but you're going to be hearing a lot about Solomon. So the thing that MGTOW ignores, okay, God does not condone polyamory, and I'm gonna show you real quick. All right, so Deuteronomy 17:17, the king must not take many wives for himself, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord. And he must not accumulate large amounts of wealth in silver and gold for himself. So the very first part of that verse, the king must not take many wives for himself, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord. And I feel that a lot of the MGTOW guys, they use somebody like a King Solomon as a reference because the king is the highest earthly authority there is. And the king is seen as an example to his people. So I'm guessing that their logic is, if the king does it, then it must be okay for me to do it as well. If you don't know, they see themselves as the prize, and they see themselves as kings. So if the kings of the past could do it, who's to say we can't do it now, right? So I'm going to say this. God allowed it, but he did not condone it. He allowed it, but he did not condone it. So let me ask you a question, okay? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that these guys were acting in the will of God or their own will? I'll give you a second to answer that. Do you think that these guys were acting in the will of God, or were they acting in their own will? Okay, you've had long enough. Hopefully you answered it. It's the latter. They were acting in their own will. Their own will. They were doing what they wanted to do, not what God told them to do. Okay? So God allowed it, but he did not condone it. God gives us a choice in this life. He gives us a choice to either follow him or to follow the devil. In scripture, he tells us to choose ye this day which God you will serve, right? You get to choose. It's right there in the verse. You make the choice, but you got to live with the consequences of your choice, right? Because that's the kind of person that God is, right? That's the kind of person he is. He allows you the ability to choose. So there are a few things that I want to point out as to why he allowed this. As to why he allowed this. For as long as there's been war, there's been more women than men, because the men had to fight in the wars while the women stayed home, right? And also due to the fact that women have longer lifespans than men in general. Men were the protectors and providers at the time. They were the protectors and providers. So you had your fathers, then you had your husbands, and then you had your brothers, right? So obviously you start at home with your dad. You come of age, you get married, you get a husband. right? He becomes your protector and your provider. Say your husband goes off to war, he dies, then, and there's no father, right? Because your father is passed, right? Then that leaves either the wife's brothers or the husband's brothers to take on the responsibility of becoming the protector and provider. Now say they're all dead, right? They're not in the picture, right? So because of the woman's poor education, because they were not allowed to be educated, and they did not have a means or way of protecting and providing for themselves, women either went into slavery, they went into prostitution, or worse, they faced death. Okay? But none of that is the case today. None of that is the case today. And polyamory is not needed. Even then, it was wrong, and God said not to do it. But especially in the case of today, it's not needed. Because women today can protect and provide for themselves. And you'll have all kinds of feminists who will sit there and tell you, I don't need no man. I can protect and provide for myself. You see it on the Just Pearly Things YouTube channel, right? There's been a lot of women that will sit there and say, I don't need no man. I make my own money. I can protect and provide for myself. They'll let you know. So the thing about MGTOW, men going their own way. It's right there in the name. Men going their own way, not men going God's way. Men going their own way. It's right there in the name. So that takes us to Proverbs 14:12. There is a path before a man that seems right, but in the end, it leads to death. In the end, it leads to death. 1 John 2:16. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. So we have a verse, Galatians 5:16. Walk in the Spirit so that you do not gratify the desires of the flesh. What are those actions of the flesh, fleshly desires, right? So in verse 19 of the same chapter, 19 through 23, we see the first thing, the first action that it mentions, sexual immorality. And as we've discussed in previous videos, sexual immorality is talking about sex before marriage. It's talking about adultery. It's talking about just lusting after a woman, just looking at her and lusting after her. You've already committed adultery in your heart, brother. So those are the things that are being encompassed within these verses here. Okay? So, yes, David had multiple wives and concubines, but Solomon took that a whole 10 steps more. Okay, so in 1 Kings 11:3-4, he had 700 wives of royal birth, so they were of royal blood even before they met Solomon, and 300 concubines. 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. And in fact, they did turn his heart away from the Lord. In Solomon's old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods instead of being completely faithful to the Lord, his God, and his father, as his father David had been. So, we have a problem. Because in Deuteronomy 17:17, which Solomon would have known, and of course his father advised him against living this way, he took on 700 wives and 300 concubines. Dang, man. Dang, wow. And as in Deuteronomy 17:17, it told you, if you do this, they're going to turn you away from me. That's what God said. Well, here in 1 Kings 11:3-4, and in fact, they did turn his heart away from the Lord. 1 Kings 11:1-2. Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women. He loved them. It's emphasized in the verse. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, he married a woman from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and from among the Hittites. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, you must not marry them, because they will turn your hearts to other gods. And yet Solomon insisted on loving them anyways. Okay. Now, we go to Ecclesiastes, the book that Solomon wrote. Chapter 2, verses 8-11. Okay. So this is Solomon talking. Here we go. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. He had everything. Everything and more than you can ever possibly hope to achieve in this life. He had it all. So I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I could take. I denied myself no pleasure. He denied himself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. This is Solomon talking. Solomon said that. Now, as a result of all of this, God got pissed. Okay? In short, God got pissed. So we see in 1 Kings 11:9-13, the Lord was very angry with Solomon, for his heart turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. He had warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen to the Lord's command. So now the Lord said to him, since you have not kept my covenant and have disobeyed my decrees, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your servants. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. From 11-13 is God's judgment of the way Solomon decided to live his life. He chose to live his life this way, in pursuit of joy and happiness. He chose this for himself, and as a consequence, God's bringing on judgment. There's consequences, right? So, Solomon's epiphany, right? This is the last chapter of Ecclesiastes. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. Completely meaningless. And then it goes on in verses 13 and 14. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. So this is the part that MGTOW leaves out. They don't tell you this. They'll just tell you that, well, the men in the Bible, Solomon, he had multiple wives, but they don't tell you the end of his story. They don't tell you the conclusion to his story, just that he had multiple wives. God's plan for marriage, right? God's plan for marriage, what he originally intended for marriage. Mark 10, 6 through 8. But God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one, since they are no longer two but one. See, guys, what I'm going to say, when you have multiple women, okay, you're sharing a piece of yourself with each and every one of these women. They'll say that about, MGTOW will say that, but about women when they sleep around. But they're not going to say that about themselves. You're doing the exact same thing that you're telling the women that they're doing. You're sharing a piece of yourself with all these different people. And with each person that you share yourself with, they're getting less and less and less and less and less of you. Just like you say to the women, the same holds true of you, right? When you get married, you and your partner become one flesh, literally. You're no longer two separate people. You're two people who have come together to work as one. Two people who have come together to work as one. And God's plan, his design. But because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. Each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. I'm just saying, just saying. And then Ephesians chapter 5, 21 through 24. And further, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. For wives, so he's talking to, let's just make this clear. Paul is talking to a whole congregation of people whom I would surmise are married, right? To one husband. Wives, he's addressing multiple wives, right? Within the congregation in reference to their husband. Their husband, right? For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For a husband, singular, is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. In everything. This is God's perfect plan for how a marriage should be. MGTOW sums it up right there in their name. Men going their own way. And when they talk about somebody like a King Solomon, a King David, an Abraham, or a Jacob, each and every one of these men went their own way instead of God's way. They did what they wanted to do instead of what God told them to do. Each and every one of them. But we see that Solomon is even warning against this kind of lifestyle. The person that I hear them reference the most is telling you not to pursue those things. So guys, I just felt led to share some of my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, please subscribe, like this video, share this content with as many people as you can. I feel that this message needs to be heard because, man, this channel, it's dedicated towards teaching men how to be men, how to be husbands, and how to have a successful marriage and relationship with your spouse. Okay? We don't have a lot of that being taught nowadays. We don't. So, yeah, that's all I got for now. Okay, if you have any comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below this video. Any suggestions, leave them down there in the comments. Any questions, leave them down there in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to each and every one of you. Guys, I'm Vaughn, and I identify as a male. Man against living in error. See you guys next time.